Hey, so let's talk about one of the biggest puzzles in learning a new language. How do we get from just, memorizing words in an app to actually speaking to another person? It feels like this giant leap, right? Well, today, we're going to crack that code.
I mean, you've totally been there, haven't you? You spend months studying, you know all the grammar rules, you're acing the quizzes. But the second you're face-to-face with a native speaker, poof, your mind just goes completely blank. It's so frustrating, but it's also incredibly common. And it turns out there's a really good reason why that happens.
So what's the deal? Why is speaking so much harder than reading or writing? Well, think about it this way. When you're writing an email, you can pause, you can think, you can Google a word, you can delete and rewrite a sentence 10 times. Speaking, it's a live performance. There is no backspace key for your mouth. The other person is right there, waiting for you to say something. It's a productive skill, and that makes it a whole different ballgame. And just look at the differences when you lay them out side by side. Speaking is all about hearing, and it's gone the second you say it. It uses rhythm and stress to add meaning, and you get instant feedback, like a confused look. Writing is visual, it's permanent, and it uses punctuation to do the job of rhythm and stress. This is exactly why someone who only learns from a book can sound a little, bookish. They're playing by a totally different set of rules.
For a long time, the solution to this problem was thought to be super simple. Just practice, a lot. We're talking about the repeat after me era. The idea was that if you just drilled sentences over and over and over again, eventually you'd just magically be able to speak.
And here's a little taste of what that actually looked like. This is a real transcript from a language class, where the teacher is drilling the word trousers. I mean, Carlos's answer is kind of funny, right? All my life. But you can see how stiff and unnatural this is. This is not a conversation.
The theory driving this whole thing was called the audio-lingual method. It was basically born from behaviorism, the idea that you can train a behavior through repetition and reward. The goal was to drill these sentence patterns into your brain so they'd become automatic habits. And this is the important part, mistakes were seen as a disaster, the enemy, something you had to stamp out immediately so you wouldn't form a bad habit. But of course, there's a huge flaw in that whole system. Real life is just not a textbook drill. Real conversations are messy, they're unpredictable, they go off on wild tangents. So this old method was basically preparing students for a perfect, scripted world that, it just doesn't exist.
And then, something amazing happened. There was this huge aha moment in the world of language teaching. A totally new idea popped up that just flipped everything we thought we knew on its head. It turned out, for decades, we had it completely backwards.
Okay, so check this out. The old idea was linear. First, you learn the building blocks, grammar rules, vocabulary lists. Then, once you've got all the pieces, you can start putting them together to have a conversation. But the new realization was a game changer. Interaction isn't the finish line, it's the path. We actually learn all those little pieces by trying to have conversations.
And this new way of thinking got a name, Communicative Language Teaching, or CLT. The whole philosophy is that the entire point of language is to get a message across. So the classroom should be all about creating real opportunities to communicate, even if it's a little messy and you make a few mistakes along the way.
To really get why this works, we have to appreciate just how much our brains are doing when we speak. It is an incredibly complex process. So what exactly is our brain juggling every single time we open our mouths?
This pyramid is a fantastic blueprint of what's going on. It shows all the different layers our brain is managing all at once, from the big picture at the top, like what's the point of this conversation, all the way down through sentences, words, and even the tiniest little sounds at the very bottom. It's an absolute symphony of mental activity.
So let's start at the bottom and work our way up. The true foundation of conversation isn't the perfectly crafted sentence. It's what linguists call an utterance. Basically, it's just a thing someone says. Would you like some pizza? Is an utterance. But so is just yelling, pizza, across the room. Real speech is built out of these useful little chunks, not perfect grammar.
Okay, moving up a level. Those utterances are made of morphemes, which are the smallest little bits of meaning. So in the word walked, walk is a morpheme, right? But that little ed on the end is also a morpheme. And it's exactly those little suffixes that language learners tend to drop when they're nervous or speaking quickly, which can totally change the meaning. And those morphemes, they're built from phonemes, the smallest units of sound. That tiny little puff of air that makes the difference between the word pit and bit, that's a phoneme. It's wild to think about the level of detail our brains are managing in just milliseconds.
But wait,
there's more. Meaning isn't just in the words themselves, it's in the music behind the words, the rhythm, the stress, the intonation. This is your hidden superpower. Just take the simple sentence, I think I know. Now listen to this. I think I know means maybe you don't, but I do. I think I know means I'm not so sure. I think I know means it's me who knows, not someone else. See? Same words, totally different meanings just by changing the stress. Incredible.
Okay, so knowing all of that incredible complexity, how do good teachers actually guide students through it? How do we take all this theory and make it work in a classroom? Well, it all comes down to a handful of really solid principles.
This is basically the modern teacher's playbook. You've got to find that sweet spot between fluency, just keeping the conversation going, and accuracy, getting the grammar right. You want to get students talking as much as possible, usually in pairs or small groups. And this one is huge. You have to create activities where students actually have to work together to figure out what the other person means. That's called negotiating for meaning. And finally, you practice both kinds of talk, the social chit-chat and the kind that gets something done.
All right, so that sounds great on paper, but what does a classroom that uses these principles actually look like? Well, you can forget those old, boring drills. The modern toolkit is so much more dynamic, way more interactive, and honestly, a lot more fun.
So instead of repeat after me, you'll see things like information gaps, where, say, I have a map with a store on it and you don't, so you have to ask me for directions. Or jigsaw activities, where everyone in a group gets one paragraph of a story and they have to talk to each other to put the whole thing together. You see role plays, simulations, even contact assignments, where students are sent out into the real world to actually talk to people. The whole point is to create a genuine reason to communicate.
And this right here is a perfect little snapshot of that negotiating for meaning in action. There's no teacher here, just 3 students talking. One person says theme, but another one hears seem. Then a third person jumps in to help, clarifying with the word topic, and click. Suddenly, everyone understands. That messy, collaborative back and forth, that's where the magic happens.
So, when you boil it all down, this is the big shift. The old classroom was basically a stage for the teacher, and the goal was perfect robotic repetition. The new classroom, it's more like a workshop for students, where the goal is the very human process of making and understanding meaning together.
And that really is the biggest takeaway here. Learning to speak a new language isn't about becoming a flawless grammar robot. It's about connection. It's about being willing to jump into the messy, creative, wonderful, and deeply human act of making yourself understood. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. If you were starting a language today, or maybe you're in the middle of learning one right now, how could you change your focus? How could you worry a little less about being perfect and a lot more on that simple, powerful goal of just connecting?